Welcome to this second presentation by our Practitioner-in-Residence for this semester here at the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention. Most of you are familiar, so I'll skip the stuff about the Institute. Just say that we're very happy to have you here. And we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Vigny Nimuraba, who has been just a tremendous and tremendously energetic and eloquent practitioner-in-residence. This week he has come all the way from Burundi to Binghamton, which is not a normal itinerary, I think. You may be the first in history, I don't know. But it was a trip worth it from our perspective because Dr. Nimuraba has been visiting multiple classes and has been sharing with us his work as the chair of the Independent Commission for Human Rights, National Commission for Human Rights in Burundi. He is an experienced atrocity prevention and human rights activist and scholar, having extensive experience, particularly in areas such as prevention, atrocity forecasting and risk assessment. He's a specialist in the politics, culture, and society of his own Great Lakes region of Africa. He has a PhD in conflict analysis from the esteemed School of Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University in Virginia. And he, I think, to me, really embodies in one person the sort of fusion of academics and atrocity prevention practice that we at the Institute really aspire to. And so he's a bit of a role model for us, frankly, of how you do it right. So we thank him for sharing his time and his energy and his experience and his thoughts with us during this week. And I'm very happy to ask him now to talk to us about Burundi preventing mass atrocities and genocide through mechanisms of social identity.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Now it's fine. Okay, I will be talking about preventing mass atrocities and genocide through mechanism of social identity. As you know, in different areas, whenever we are giving talk, we look at what is already on the ground, and we see what succeeded and what may not have succeeded. And then we try to throw out some ideas that we think can help. That's what I'm doing with this. We know that we have a broad literature on mass atrocity and genocide prevention. But we know also that there are many cases that our intervention in terms of prevention did not work. And we are trying to see here and there if there is anything else that can contribute to the success of this kind of intervention. First, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about Burundi so that you can know exactly when we talk about Burundi, what do we refer to, what is the history, what are the people in Burundi, and also because the country is characterized by a series of civil war, I'm going to see briefly about what happened in the country, but also I'm going to discuss a little about the motivation for the understanding of mass atrocity and also the risk factors. In terms of risk, I will be focusing most importantly on the perception, because for me there is a great difference between what we call risk factors and how we understand those risk factors. Also, I will be talking about the mechanism of social identity, how this has an influence on the prevention of mass atrocities, and then I will conclude. Burundi is located between Rwanda, Tanzania, and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's in Eastern Central Africa, and we have a population which is around 12 million. It has the size, almost the same size as Maryland. We have a tropical climate. Whenever you want to have the best orange, you have to come to Burundi. It doesn't have any chemicals and it tastes very well. The same for avocados. And we don't have any access to sea or ocean, but we are we have Lake Tanganyika, which is the second deepest lake in the world, and it has good fish. In terms of population, Burundi has 3 ethnic groups. It is said that we have Twa, who are the minority and who are the inhabitants, were living in Burundi even before other come. And after, between the 5th and the 11th century, they say that Hutu may have come from different regions. As you can see over there, it is said that most of the Hutu may have come from the west, while Tutsi, it is said that they came from north and east. But I don't go with that, but it's what is written in the books. In terms of civil war, that it's a memorial of genocide of high school students who were killed in 1993. Actually, I like to use that picture because it is at less than 10 kilometers or where I was studying when the war happened. That's why this may have also inspired me. I spent a whole week fighting with the population around. And I don't know if I was around 14, 15 years old. And that's where we had burned all students only because they were Tutsi. This is serious because those kids were 15, 20 years old and they have no idea what politics looks like. But they were burned in that area. You see the small house over there and around, and they decided to build that monument for the never again for Burundi. Before that, we had what some people call genocide or mass killings that happened in 1972. Some of them call it genocide against Hutu, but that has not yet been accepted by the United Nations. And in 88 and 99, we have what we call Ntega Marangara killings, which was also another kind of killing that took place in the north of the country. Luckily, it did not spread the entire country, but the start was almost the same. In 1993, when the first president who was democratically elected was killed by a group of soldiers, he was a Hutu, and those soldiers who killed him were Tutsi, and they decided, people like in the countryside, to go after Tutsi, and they killed them. That's why I showed that those kids were killed because they are Tutsi only, without any other reason. You understand where I come from. And then just after the killing of the president, that's why most Hutu went crazy and they started killing each Tutsi that they could see on their way. Of course, after a few weeks, the army went to revenge, and they killed using weapons, national guns and so forth, to kill most of the Hutu that they could. You see that the back and forth and the revenge that was in Burundi lasts more than a decade, people killing one another, until 2000 when the Arusha Accord was signed and the power sharing was decided so that Hutu and the Tutsi can be together in the government. In 2015, almost another kind of problem happened because there was a controversial election. The president was running for a so-called third term, even if people don't agree on that. It almost generated the same kind of killings, but luckily there had been some changes in terms of social identity, as we are going to see, which caused the worst not to happen. How do we understand mass atrocities motivation? I'm not going to define mass atrocity. I'm just going to go by one item, genocide, which is defined as any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in war or in a part a nation, ethnic, racial, a religious group. Why did I highlight intent and destroy? Because I will be discussing about social identity to see exactly how people think and plan and put themselves in a category which is quietly different from others, the us and versus them. Why they do it and how they plan to reach that level of killing people. But also it's not only killing. You see that the second point is about causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. This also comes to the social identity, because when you decided to cause bodily injury, it's not something which funny. It's something really which is at the extreme level. Then it's difficult to conceive in your brain and your mind to injure somebody unless you have categorized him as somebody who doesn't deserve to be human. And that is the basis of genocide and mass atrocities. Also, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. It's the same in a whole or in a part. Also, measures intended to prevent birth. Imagine when you decided that a category of people will maybe not have children. You want to exterminate that group. That means the category that you have put that all people is really not human. You put them in a separate category which doesn't deserve as human deserve. You understand the process that can lead to take that decision. It's not only because you have been told that those people are bad. It's not because only there is a policy that is trying to divide the people. It's because you have internalized and you have understood, not only understood, you are convinced that the difference between the two social groups is great and that there is nothing that we have in common. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. You can go and read some of the books that talk about genocide and so forth. You will see that there are some strategies that are put in by the group which are committing genocide in terms of banning either children or education for those children, or even changing their mentality so that they don't continue to familiarize with their own family. This is something which may be serious because it goes to the point that you are going to move a category of people from their own social identity and you tend to give them another different social identity because the one they have, they don't deserve to live as human. You want to exterminate this category of people. What is in the mind and how can this change? I am lucky because you never witnessed people who are killing or who are committing mass atrocities or genocide. Most of them, you look at him in the eye, you see that the person has already changed. In the mind, he's not the person that you used to know. You will see sometimes they are sweating, sometimes they are opening widely the eyes, sometimes they have like some kind of red blood being seen in the eyes because they are no longer in the mood of human being. What James Waller said is true about upstream prevention, about midstream prevention, and downstream prevention. Of course, when you are preventing genocide from happening, you have to build resilience. But for me, I take this seriously and I say there are always structures in the community that are fostering divisions between people, putting them in different social identities and showing how those social identities are so different and there is nothing in common. But for me, I call it another way. I say the demystification. All the myths that have been created to let you know that if you are a Hutu in Rwanda, you have to hate Tutsi, you have to do whatever you can to exterminate all the Hutu. The only thing that can be done in terms of social identity is the demystification. You have to show that the myths that have been built by political officers or by police or by the government is not true. That's what I call demystification. In terms of midstream prevention, Yeah, I gave the example of military intervention, but we do have other intervention that can be done whenever we are in the middle of war, when people are being killed. For me, I bring this in terms of social identity. What we need is the verification. People will tell you that, you know, Hutu are killing Tutsi. You need to verify to know if really Hutu are killing Tutsi, or if people have been sensitized to do that such horrible thing without even thinking, because there are so many people who don't even think. They are told, you know, the only enemy that we have is the other. Do whatever you can so that we can get rid of that generation. What we need to do then is to come back and think first before we act. Is what we are being told true? Are people who are being killed only from our social identity? And also make one step ahead to know exactly the perpetrator for this kind of mass atrocity, for this kind of genocide. Are they unique? They are the same? Because when you go in depth and observe what is happening, you will find that the perpetrators are not from the same ethnic group. There are mixture because they have advantages. Sometimes they can even use people who are not from those ethnic groups. And after the genocide or mass atrocities have taken, of course we have downstream prevention, rebuilding society. But for me is the fact that we need to confirm the confirmation of our sameness. Because whenever everything is happening, they try to divide you. But after, the only thing that can keep us together and that can prevent future atrocities and mass atrocities from happening is the conviction that we have more in common and that we are the same. Because if this doesn't happen, we can just have a short-term peace, negative peace. And then after 5 years, 6 years, the same genocide will happen. I don't want this to happen because you can put in policies, you can put in some structures, but when people are not fully convinced that they have more in common and that the difference that they have been told are not true, the thing will turn back and it will happen. But when people are really convinced about the sameness, it will be very, very difficult. And we witnessed this in 2015. Tutsi went to sensitize a group of Tutsi. Isolated, they say, you know, we need to take weapons and to fight Hutu because they may come and assassinate all of us. And the Tutsi look into their eyes and they say, really, you want what we went through? Do you want us to come back again and fight? And this did not happen. The same thing happened to Hutu. They say, you know, Tutsi want to take over the power. Please make sure you stand up so that we can get rid of those Tutsi before they take over. And Hutu look into the eyes of the leaders who are sensitizing them. They say, you know, I think we deserve peace. We know that we have been having an administration of Hutu and so forth, but what we enjoy is more peace than the political advantages that you guys are fighting for. In terms of social risk assessment, what do I want to mention? Of course, risk assessment is a honest accounting of the political, structural, institutional, and social, and also cultural factors that make mass atrocities more statistically likely to occur. For me, I point on social because I'm talking about social identity. It doesn't matter whatever kind of political, whatever structural institutional, whatever culture that is in the country, they can try to foster divisions. But when social identities are really clear that people are the same, this will not find a way to turn into genocide because people will not be convinced of the differences. Continuing with the risk factors. Of course, we studied that governance, history of conflict, economic conditions, social fragmentation are some of the risk factors. But what do I have to say? You know, yes, all these are true to one extent. Which one? The perception or the conviction of people that the governance which is in place is really not good. I will tell you, I will give you an example. In terms of governance, you may have corruption in Congo, but the moment that Congolese see corruption as something which is really fair, just, that gives them some advantages, this will not cause genocide or mass atrocities because people will accept it the way it is. But the perception that people may have on what governance is, when they have a negative perception, it will motivate their social identity and it will strengthen their willingness to get divided or to fight the other group. The same happens for conflict history. Yeah, of course, what we read in books saying each country which has been experiencing several conflicts or mass atrocities is more likely to experience another civil war, another genocide. Yes, it may, because of the perception, but in some situations, not. Because people can see and look at the history of the conflict, the same thing happened in Burundi, and then they will conclude, actually, we fought in 1972, we fought in 1993, we fought in 2015, and we did not gain anything. And the history of the conflict will be the one that will motivate the people to be really, to refuse to get involved in this kind of killings, because the perception that they have toward that is really the negative of what people may think may motivate them to engage into mass violence or into mass atrocities. Every example can be given, whether you talk about economic condition, whether you talk about social fragmentation. Do we say that every country where the economy is very low, where people don't have anything to eat, will be the one to start experiencing mass atrocities? No. To be a factor, yes. But in terms of how people perceive that poverty, it can keep them from accepting to fight, or it can motivate them to fight. It depends on the negative or the positive perception that people have toward that. Even social fragmentation, it's the same. It depends on how you see the groups that we have. In the US, we have really so many races, if I can say so. But is the US more likely to experience genocide because there is this kind of social fragmentation? In a way, yes, but in another, no, because it will depend on the US citizen how they see it. If they see it negatively, then yes. But when they see it and comprehend it in a way that it will not allow them to get divided in terms of their social identity, this will not have any risk to the population. That's why the perception of all these risks that are observed by the social identity will lead the person who has been solicited to engage in mass atrocity or in genocide to take action. You can either take action to accept what you have been sensitized to do, which is to kill others, or you can just take action not to implement what you have been taught. Because every time that government are inciting people to kill each other, they don't really, you need to go and do some research. Sometimes the state is sensitizing people to kill each other and they don't, because there are some aspect that comes back to this kind of perception. Of course, I was talking about social identity. It's a feeling of belonging to a social group as a strong connection with social category and an important part of our mind that affects our social perception and behavior. Social perception and behavior. Behavior is also action. You take action because you are convinced or because what you perceive is really convincing to you. Because sometimes you get information, it's not enough to convince you to take action. There are three components. First, the knowledge about the membership. The second, the emotional involvement and the loyalty. The third and the last, the belief about sameness of in-group and the difference between out-group. That was said by Costarina. Why do I come to this when I'm talking about social identity? Because people may come to you and tell you you are a Hutu, and you are not convinced in your heart that you are Hutu. Therefore, whatever they are telling you to act in the name of Hutu cannot really be implemented. That's why I'm saying this. The knowledge about the membership is really crucial. And also the perception of that membership, is Hutu meant to kill Tutsi, or is a Tutsi meant to kill Hutu? If the perception of ethnic group or social identity is not really bad, you are not going to engage in this kind of killing. The second, the emotional involvement in loyalty. That's when people are calling you, say, you are my brother, you are from our own ethnic group. Come so that we can protect ourselves and you don't feel yourself in danger. You are not going to follow. The last one, the sameness. That's a key example in Burundi. Of course, politicians, they were talking about, you know, we are Hutu, we are Tutsi, we are the same, we are the victims. But when Tutsi were on power, did they share everything and natural resources with other Tutsi? No. When Hutu took over, did they decide to serve everything with other Hutu? No. That's where this comes. We are not really the same within our own supposed in-group. We are a diverse group. The moment you realize that your social identity doesn't put you in one category, then you are less likely to act in terms of committing genocide or mass atrocities because you are not convinced about it. Let's go and then see the major mechanism of social identity. I was talking about the people deciding to act violently or not acting violently, but what are the major elements that will drive a person to make this decision or not to make the other one? First, it's the frustration aggression, which turned out to be the theory of frustration aggression, and also the relative deprivation, collective axiology, the chosen trauma and glories, and lastly, threat. Let's start with this frustration aggression theory. You know, Fred and Einstein were discussing about the origin of war and why people turn violent. And they decided, they saw that actually being violent or committing crime such as mass atrocities, such as genocide, it's something that people can learn. People can learn to be violent. The same way they can learn good behavior. This means there is a lot we can do in terms of prevention. If we are convinced that we learn, it's a process of learning. Like you can train somebody to ride a bike, you can also train somebody to kill. That's why whenever somebody is going into the army, what they do first is training. The training is not just to inform them how to shoot. No. The first training is psychological because they want really to make sure they work on the mind and the thinking of the army, the soldier, so that they can act in a way that will be good for the government. It's an example. Also, another point which is very important for the brain. Of course, frustration comes whenever people are discriminated against, whenever people don't have equal access to justice, when they don't have equal access to natural resources. But most of the time, those people who are victims don't have the capacity or the energy that will allow them to revenge toward the person who's perpetuating this kind of violence. Most of the time, they blame others. And this is what has been happening in many countries. When the army went and killed the president in Burundi, Burundian people did not run after the army so that they can kill the army officers. They went and killed humble Tutsi who are living in the countryside, in the hills, who did not know anything. Meaning, frustration, aggression is also something that we can work on when we are doing prevention. We know exactly if somebody is being frustrated, and we know the element that caused the problem to be frustrated. Then, in terms of social identity, when you know that this category of people have been expressing this type of frustration, there are many interventions that can be made before they explode, before they turn around and start blaming others and even start killing them. The second element is the relative deprivation. Most of the time, I like the picture. I take this and consider as a leader, African leader, who's eating most of the bread and just give the half which is remaining to the entire population of the country and tell them, you know, well, I left you half, meaning I took half, I left you half. And he doesn't count how many people are going to share the piece. Then, people over there will feel deprived because of what? Because this is what they were going to get. Most of the time in our countries, we say these were natural resources that we have access to, but only one person is benefiting from it. This is very important because it will cause these people to compare what they are getting and what they were supposed to get if there was not such person who's taking over everything. Was I supposed to get health care? Yes. But if instead of getting health care, they are only paying medication and consultation for people who are on higher positions and the entire population doesn't get anything, that can cause relative deprivation. And this can really make the entire population stand up and commit genocide and mass atrocities because they feel oppressed. They feel that what they deserve, actually, they did not get it. In terms of prevention, you understand that the moment you know that people are upset because they don't have access to what they deserve, because they say we deserve it, but we do not get it, then an intervention is possible to be put in place so that before the crash starts, you can have changed the situation. The third is the collective axiology, which is really simple. We, they, the boundaries, or creating the image of the other. Of course, this is very important. We put in mind that we are good and that other people are bad. It may be true, it may be false. You create the image of those. You know, Tutsi are cockroaches. Imagine to call somebody, a human being, this kind of name. You are creating an image of somebody, you are dehumanizing the person. It's almost killing him. You understand that this can be prevented the moment you start listening to hate speeches. And hate speeches is happening almost everywhere. In Burundi, in Rwanda, in Tanzania, even the US. The moment you see that people are calling others other name, pay attention and see if they are not creating this kind of bad image. We are good, they are bad. And this can explode, it can make people explode if it is not dealt with carefully. That's why you see over there is a destroyed house. Actually, this house was not destroyed by people. it was natural resources, not natural disaster, because those stones were falling from the mountain and then destroyed the house. When we are facing collective axiology, we say, you know, the house was a church for Hutu people. I think the people who may have destroyed it are Tutsi. And then you go after Tutsi to kill them because you know they are bad. They are the one who always commit this kind of abuses. You understand when it can lead people. And then I suggested this. This is the kind of activities that I conducted with youth in terms of bringing them together to have games or to have activities, physical activities, I mean, and then have conversation after or in between so that they can learn what is good from the other. Because most of the time, you see people and you evaluate them based on the negative side. When you spend some time together, you take time to learn about them and the good side, because nobody on earth doesn't have something good that you can appreciate from him. But unless you take time to listen to him or to work with him, you will not know exactly what he's capable of. Other thing, chosen trauma and glories. The chosen trauma and glories are very important in terms of prevention of mass atrocities and genocide. There is, most of the time, negative or positive aspect of past experiences. I will tell you in Burundi, from independence up to 2005 or even 2000, whenever Hutu saw a person like this, they had to run. You understand me? Just to see an image of soldier, you know that the person is a Tutsi and the Tutsi will run after you to kill you. This is past trauma because of the years they have been seeing soldiers in this uniform killing Hutu. And the other side, in terms of chosen glories, when a Tutsi saw the same people passing by in the neighborhood, he will run to say cheese, to say hi, to ask for corned beef or any kind of water, something like that. Because he assumed that each soldier is a Tutsi and the Tutsi is made to protect only Tutsi. These are chosen glories. And how do we do this? Of course, we need to make sure we have a prevention method to make sure people are really aware of the responsibility and the role that these people play. The example was to bring those soldiers and have a soccer game with the population around, or to take people who were from the rebel group and then the previous soldiers so that they can play together or share something or celebrate it together so that they can see that everybody has something in common. The threat. This is in Burundi. And it happened after 2005. What was supposed to be a threat from a Hutu? This is a Tutsi soldier, and this is a Hutu lady, and they were sitting together because there is no longer any threat. But before, there was a threat because of the aggressiveness of soldiers toward Hutu. Meaning, if there is an increase of aggressiveness, there is also an increase of anger. You cannot be happy when you have been, tortured. When you know that whenever you get in classroom, it doesn't happen, of course, in the US, the professor will beat you. You develop this kind of threat whenever you see even the professor getting in school, into the classroom. It does happen like that. Of course, it develops also antagonism. There is no way you can go on the same way with somebody that you know is not looking for anything good for you. That's what is happening. But also, it undermines stability. People who are unhappy, people who are mistreated, most of the time, Yes, they feel the threat, but also they are the threat for the other group. You cannot have peace when the other doesn't have peace. Finally, what can be done? Of course, almost it's the same. When you are working with people, try to show them that in the group, the social identity group, they have diverse group, and that the diversity is not a problem. What to do? This is an image that I found in a seminary school. When the current ruling party was still in the bush, it happened to go and attack in seminary. And they asked the student to get divided in terms of ethnic groups. They say Tutsi go on the side and Hutu go on the side, on the other side. And the seminarists, they decided not to get divided. And they took their guns and shoot all of them. Those are 40 people who died. They are they are supposed like they are seen like being in heaven because of unity and friendship that they showed. They could get divided because they are Hutu and Tutsi. They could just go aside the Hutu because the Hutu were sure they were not going to be killed. But they decided to stay with their friends so that they can die together or live together. Those are considered as an example because of what they are promoting positive consciousness. When you are really conscious of what you are doing, you see the impact of mass killing, you see the impact of genocide, and therefore you are less likely to commit this kind of crime. This is why whenever people pass by that church, they take some picture, and we did take picture also, because it did teach us about how we can really behave and refuse to get divided or to hate others. Other thing that I really loved and I want to talk that helped so that social identity can stick together in Burundi is this peace and reconciliation agreement, which was signed in 2000 between the group of Tutsi, G10, and the group of Hutu, G7. I think it was the last time in the history of Burundi where we had groups which are 100% ethnically divided. Now everything, because of this agreement, has changed. We don't have any more group which is made of Hutu and a group which is made of Tutsi. Because this same, it had to give some kind of restriction about what percentage of Hutu we should have in the government and what percentage of Tutsi we could have in the government. And I love it because it is divided into 5 different chapters. See what the first is. The nature of Burundian conflict, the problem of genocide, and the exclusion as well as the solution. They really took time to talk about the past of the country, to discuss about the conflict. That's why I was talking about awareness, raising awareness so that the people can really understand where they come from, where they are, and when they want to go. Because if you don't know what happened and the problem that you are facing or what you faced before, it will be so hard for you to decide exactly which trajectory to take. The moment they talk to discuss that also inspired them in terms of deciding that they wanted democracy and the good governance. With democracy, of course, everybody can elect whoever they want, and the good governance, of course, the respect of human rights. But also the peace and security for all, meaning all ethnic groups. People are conscious about the necessity of peace and security for both, but also the reconstruction. You know, after war, most of the time, we have to rebuild all the destroyed infrastructures. And that's what they were discussing in the 4th chapter, reconstruction and development. Of course, you know that in African countries and every country, when there is no development, people don't have job, and they don't have hope for the future. And when you don't have hope for the future, you are like blown away by the wind. Whoever comes, he will just tell you 2 words and you follow. Finally, they discussed about the guarantees for the implementation of the agreement. That's where comes the ethnic quotas, to make sure each ethnic group is represented and is secured and is everywhere. Also, we talked about the reducing social identity divides. Those are kind of activities that we've been conducting in Burundi to make sure people have the same advantages. They have something to share. We have Hutu and Tutsi here. But what they share in that moment was to give answer to the Q&A. And the Q&A, they had some kind of incentive. Either you get copybook, either you get a phone, or you get, I don't know, pens and so forth. And the people find themselves together and helping another to answer. This is an aspect that can help also reducing social identity. But as I said before, we did not plan this activity just to distribute or to ask the Q&A. They have to start by other physical activities. Sometimes it was games, sometimes it was cleaning roads for common interests. And then after they do this kind of activities, or in the middle of the activity, people had to stop so that we can have discussion about how they can better improve the relationships. And this really worked. In terms of conclusions, we really need to raise positive consciousness, because some people may be traumatized if they don't find somebody or any activity that will really help them breathe in and breathe out and see that there is something positive that can come tomorrow. It will be very difficult. And also we need a true commitment to change. Yeah, when we are talking about the prevention and so forth, for the strategies, the intervention and so forth. Sometimes we forget that this can be a short-term intervention that doesn't last longer. But when we work on the conscience of people and there is a true commitment to change, people will change from inside, from their heart. And when people change from their heart, it's difficult really to move them back. But when they change just to please you or because there is an obligation to do so, that will spend like 2 weeks and they go back to their own lives. Also, the absence of long-term cohesion. Sometimes you can need to use force. For Burundi, the mediation team, they did use force to make sure they accept all to sign the agreement and to include different ethnic groups in the beginning, because nobody was understanding why they should mix ethnic groups into different structures of institutions. But it was just for a short term. When they started, they saw that it was working, and then they kept it. They kept it. Also, we must have inclusive participation in the design and implementation of initiatives. This is a serious issue in many countries. We just talk about intervention. We talk about development. We talk about prevention. But at what extent people who are the beneficiaries are helping designing and implementing? Because if I'm the one designing the prevention, I will make sure all the factors that will satisfy me are included. And then when it is time for implementing these policies, it will be easier to do it. You can see there are many NGOs which go and do amazing job in terms of water and sanitation. But after 1 year, people have already destroyed it. The same happens for the prevention. You can really call people for discussions, for meetings, and because they are getting per diem, what they are accustomed to in Africa, they will just come to get the per diem. But after the project ends, you go evaluate, you find that everybody is back in his area. This will not help at all. Also, we need economic opportunities. We are in developing countries. Unless we guarantee a better future for our youth and for our population, it will be difficult for them to be able to prevent, because somebody was saying, you teach peace or you talk about peace because you have eaten. If you have not eaten, it will be difficult to go teach peace. The same applies for the prevention of mass atrocities and violence. And lastly, and more importantly, we need education. I'm not only talking about formal education, even training, even, I don't know, experience from different other people. We need it because we saw that most of the people who get involved in these mass atrocities, in this genocide, are not really people who are educated. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
Sure.
Go ahead. I have two questions. First, thank you so much for your presentation. My first question is about the specific activities that you do when you work with youth, and the activities or the, I don't know how else to qualify them, the activities, I'll just say, that you do with adults. You said you actually had worked with soldiers as well. So what do you do with soldiers versus what you do with youth? That's my first question. The second question is, you mentioned that the mediation team in the beginning, to make people or the different groups sign the agreement, they use coercion. How was that? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, in terms of activities that I did with youth, the first activity was to bring them together to do community work, like physical community work. You decided that you are going to help people who are in hospital. You know that most of the people who are poor and they are in hospital, they don't have clothes, they don't have food and so forth. You just go there, you distribute soap, you distribute some clothing, and you distribute maybe some kind of food. And this kind of distribution involves a prior preparation, meaning you have to coordinate so that you can get what you are going to bring to the people who are needy. And this will make everybody come in without any consideration of ethnic group. You understand that at least you have to work together for a certain. Of course, when we see them going to the hospital, we see it's a really group. But if you see the activities that have been done, the kind of communication, because the change in mind and the consciousness, sometimes it goes through communication. When you have never talked to somebody, it will be difficult to know what he thinks and how he reacts and how passionate he is towards something. And those are some of the activities. Other activities were about games. Some people really do love game. See, for example, if Americans were really fighting for this or the other game, and then there is football game somewhere. You can easily bring them back and have two opposite teams play and have followers really sit down together and discuss. You just need, in the mid of the game, just to stop a little so that nobody goes home and have some kind of conversation and discussion. Because most of the activities that we did, we had to do it in the middle of the activity that we were doing. If we were like cleaning road, we could clean for 1 hour and then stop for 1 hour just to have this discussion, wherever we are. Key issues that, like the questions that we're asking were about acceptance of the others, or sometimes questions about what do you do if somebody disagrees with you? Yeah, those kind of questions really, you get innovative answers that we're even not planning to have. Or you ask them to ask questions. Most of the time, it becomes really serious because they will tell you, okay, what are stones, during the protests, we're asking, what are stones made for? To throw to birds or to people or to break glasses or, yeah. And people say, no, they are not meant for that. We should use them to build our houses. Maybe somebody who needs a shelter can benefit from it. these are kind of exercises that we could do, and that really helped people to bring them back. And in terms of soldiers, there are many activities. First of all, soldiers, they have started this activity of really planting trees. If you bring them to plant trees, of course you are helping to save the environment, but at the same time they are doing physical exercise, and at the same time they have time to talk. And then in the middle you stop and you ask them some questions, or you ask a suggestion about the following activity, because most of the time when you start the activity, you don't just want to lead it. Most of the time you have to be flexible and to ask them, and they will be the one driving you. That's where you see really that people are shifting. What was the second question?
About the mediation team, the mediators and how...
Yes. For the mediation team, first of all, you know that they had powerful mediation. When you have a chief of state, the president, leading a mediation, most of the time he doesn't joke. And people who were in the mediation did not want to conclude it, not because they were so different perception, but because the per diem was high. Go and read, it was among the highest per diem. Each one who attended those kind of negotiation was able to build a house after the mediation. You understand how much they got per day. Imagine you are from a developing country, you are poor, and then whenever you attend in Tanzania, you go back with 20,000 US dollar. And you go back home, you are waiting for the mediator to come back and to call you so that you can get again 20,000. It's normal, we are human. But they noticed that nobody really was interested in continuing. They just wanted to continue taking plane and go to collect money. Now in Bujumbura we have a headquarters which is called, a name which is related to the place where they were having negotiations, because most of the people came in and built houses over there. But what did the president do by the time when he was doing mediation? He obliged them. You either accept to sign and to get people from different ethnic group in your group, or I leave the mediation and then the international community will come after you because you are the only one who doesn't want peace. What are you going to do? To fight all groups alone? No. You just discuss about possibility, how you can implement what it will be signed. And then, after when they return, they saw that it was really working. And even now, the Arusha Accord is still working in terms of really social cohesion and really including people from different backgrounds, different ethnic groups, so that they can be included in the administration, in the defense forces.
Problem, like you said, the U.S. is a multi-ethnic society, but it's not a problem because it's not displayed as a problem. What's a good way of showing that there is a risk for atrocities without creating that kind of negative cause and effect?
Yeah, there is a risk of atrocities whenever all those risk factors that I mentioned are really perceived per se as being real. Because the point for me is that even if we have those risks listed over there, the perception and the conviction of people may not really qualify them as real risks. But the moment they are really afraid, they say, you know, this is true. The governance system is not really doing any good job for us. We should really try to get rid of everybody. That means the perception of them is really serious and it's correct. And that means the social identity, which is perceiving that situation, has already established a barrier or a boundary between them as a social identity and others who are involved in the government. That's why you see the divide is really clear, and it becomes and it grows faster and faster. But the moment they are not yet perceiving it as real, then you understand it will not have any impact.
Any other question? Yes.
So this idea of social identities as changeable,
Yes.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So my question is what kind of actors are best positioned to not just initiate that kind of change, but to sort of have some sort of best influence on the outcome? Because once you start changing social identities, it's not necessarily clear that you can control how they change. And I think that one thing that strikes me about your presentation is that it's not clear to me whether governments are the best positioned ever to do these sorts of things. And so we're talking about civil society organizations, right? And so if that's true, I'd love to hear more about the kind of civil society organizations in Burundi that you would nominate as having had the most success in this area. And then finally, if you can say if you can step back and identify some most promising practices that they have come up with.
Yeah, unfortunately, I will not say what civil society organizations are more likely to promote this kind of change, but I will say that in each community, there must be some key people who are more influential and who can be trusted, who can lead this kind of change. When you are coming from outside into a social identity group, it will be impossible for you to drive this kind of change. That's why I say, I was saying in group. That means somebody within the group has the influence that can really reach you, and then explain that we should move this way or the other. This is why whenever there is a change, there is also some kind of relationship between the people in the group, which will continue to look for ways to continue leading the group. Most of the time when we are talking social identity, we are not referring to the government. We are talking about inside change, and the inside change can only be led by somebody from inside. You will find some community. We can identify some community, but in each community, there are few people who understand, and whenever they understand, they have this capacity, this talent of influencing others from the group to move toward the point A or C. No more questions? Yes.
Just to follow up on Max's question, so you're saying, you said that I can't talk about civil society, but I can talk about certain people, right? Or like some individuals, influencers. Why is that? Is that because there's not a very much like a developed?
Because the civil society organizations are driven by those people from inside. Go see what kind of civil society organizations are more productive. They are not even like civil society which are coming from other area or zones. They are civil society which are operating in that commune or in that province. And when you dig inside those civil society organizations, there are some key individuals. I don't know if I make myself understood, because whether you are in a political party, I think maybe it's a different culture. You will see that there are key individuals in that political party who are really deciding the direction, and the members are more likely to follow them and to implement the suggestions. Even civil society, they will tell you, okay, now, which league taker, human right, is really very active. But you find that within the league taker, we have only 3 people who are taking, like they are strategizing, they are really more capable of explaining the idea, and everybody from the country, they follow. They are always saying league taker, but inside only 3 people are driving it.
Yes.
Earlier you showed a picture of the seminary school of those children that basically became martyrs. How did the community rebuild after that? If you have any details about that.
I think, I went there many times. It was not only that community, it's Burundi, the entire Burundi, because in each commune we have Hutu who died, being killed by Tutsi, and we have Tutsi who died killed by vice versa. And now we understand the worst happened. And that is great because we have already reached the point where we accept what happened and we are sorry about it. Now we need to move forward. Even what happened in that seminary, people in the neighborhood, they really know, they are aware, but they say this should not happen again. Really, this was a crazy mistake. I think that's the advantage that the country has. If not, revenge was going to go on, and it would be really in a very bad situation now.
Yes.
I'm interested, it's a bit of a personal question, because I know in previous class you talked about, you don't necessarily say someone was Hutu or Tutsi, you're together. I'm kind of curious how you grew up. Did you have a certain identity at one point, and how did that change your life?
To tell you the truth, I was aware of my ethnic group during the war. Because since I was born, nobody told me if I was Hutu or Tutsi. That's why I went, when the war started, because I was in really privileged seminary, and then we heard people bumping on the wall, saying, today Hutu are going to die and the Tutsi will perish. Say, what is that? And then they had to come together and sit down in one classroom, trying to without knowing whatever to do. But when we started getting divided, because most of the time when something happens, people who know those ethnic groups, they get divided, they develop tensions. Of course, social identity, they started having borders and so forth, boundaries. And then I went to one group, because I saw one group there and another day. I went to one group. What is happening? What should we do? And somebody say, you, go away. You are not with us. And then I turned around. I went to the other group. They say, are you coming to get information from our group? Go if you don't want to die. And then I went in the middle like this. My God, I started crying. I said, what should I do? And they were asking me only one question. Are you Hutu or Tutsi? I said, I don't know. You don't know your ethnic group? I have no idea. And then the advantage that I got is because when I went to that school, my family has asked somebody who was in the 8th grade to take me because he knew the school and he was there. I went to ask him. I went to that group and they chased me. And he beat me seriously. Say, you killed my parents and they were coming here. And then I ran away and went to the other group and said, the other guy just hit me. I was asking and he said that my parent killed his parent. I don't know what to do. Because then this happened to you. You are a Hutu. Come, you are in our group. Because we know that guy is a Tutsi. And then from there, I was aware that I was a Hutu. And then some people had the same experience. But because people tell you you are Hutu, then during 1993 up to 2000, this was a serious deal because you had to know it, and if you did not know it, you had to ask to know whether you ran away from the soldiers or if you ran toward them, because that we had many years. Then everybody knew. That's why I say it's not ethnic group, it's just perceived ethnic group. Because I know there are many Tutsi who are running with us all these years. And among those, some ended up by being killed by soldiers because they say there is no Hutu who's running, no Tutsi in this area. You understand? It's really sophisticated.
So let's thank our speaker again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.